It's a challenge.
Well, I don't know if how far they will go.
If you're looking for Avtcore, this is it. If you're not, it's not it. That's true. I mean, if there's enough of you, you could chase us out and we do something else, but hopefully that won't happen. But usually, yeah. All right, this is beginning to seem like a critical mass. So, welcome to Avtcore. What? Okay. Okay, great. So, Tim has volunteered to take notes in the Etherpad. Since it's Etherpad, if anybody wants to open it and look over his shoulder and see if he, and correct his typos or whatever, I'm sure he would appreciate that. Do we have anybody other than me in the Jabber room? I doubt there's going to be. Well, we do have 2 remote participants. So so to the remote participants, if you want to speak to the room and you can, use the remote queue. But if not, I can keep an eye on the room. But it'd be good if we had somebody else in the Jabber room just to relay if necessary.
I'll keep an eye on as much as I can.
Okay, so Colin will keep an eye on that. So I think that's all the opening administrivia. So let's see. How does this? Oh, there we go. Note well. I think this is the wrong note well. I think is there supposed to be a new one now? I never remember. Okay, well, pretend this is the new note well and note it well. And if you have any IPR, you figure out what to do and do the right thing, please. Our agenda, we're starting with our agenda batch and status update. Then we'll have Colin doing the RMCAT feedback message. Magnus, as it turns out, doing the multiplexing guidelines. And then Ronnie doing his priority marking header extension. And then anything else you're interested in before you can all wander off and argue about what the label RFC means later on. No new published documents this time, but we still have a bunch of stuff sitting in the RFC editor queue with misrefs, most of which aren't our fault. We're still waiting on bundle, but one of which is still waiting on frame marking, so that's on us. Multipath RDP is still expired. I think last time we had some discussion, we were going to do a call on the list to see if anybody still cared. We cared so little that we didn't do the call on the list, which probably tells us something. So I don't remember what, I think, do you remember what we agreed, what the decision was last time about multipath RTP? Are we going to see if anybody cares, and if not, remove it as a milestone? Okay, so we'll try to actually remember to do that this time. Note taker, please put a note, something in the notes to remind us to do that. Okay, good. And Rachel says she'll actually do it, which is good because she remembers to do things unlike me. And then frame marking, we had a working group last call, and there were a number of comments, and then there was no new revision, which seems unfortunate. Are any of the authors of that here? Mo's not here. Oh, Mo's on the meeting call. Mo, do you want to talk about what the status of frame marking is? Here's Mo. Excellent. Did I push the button properly? There we are.
Hello?
Mo, we don't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we hear you.
Okay.
Low, quietly.
Here we go. Is this better?
Yeah.
Yes, we still have to make a couple of updates. I'll try to get those done during this week, hopefully by tomorrow at the latest. There's still some questions about the types of streams that the frame marking is useful for, and some people are now questioning whether or not the restrictions we put in place are really okay to handle real streams that people plan to use. So to recap, there's a restriction of that must be temporally nested streams. That's the only thing that frame marking is recommended for. And some people are wondering whether or not that's actually too restrictive. So we're trying to figure out if there's ways to relax some of those and get the updates in if we do.
All right, so we'll look for that update this week. I mean, if you could also send to the list how you resolved the various issues that were raised in the last call, then we can look at that and decide whether everybody agrees that those are the right resolutions.
And separate from the last call, there, Ronnie also had a question about, I guess it's more related to his version of frame marking, but he was wondering about, are all of the packets with the discard bit roughly equivalent or not? And of course, his version is giving more differentiation than just that one bit, but I think is probably still a valid question of whether or not we should add something in the frame marking graph to indicate that whether or not they should be treated equally, or whether the other fields should also be used in that case. Is the discard priority just on the D bit, or is it also on the D bit plus the TID and lid in addition to it?
Ronnie, the question I had was more because I got the same question in my draft about how do you know how much bandwidth is used in each of the layers in order if you want to discard and you want to achieve a certain bandwidth. So it was asked from me about the priorities, but I figure out it's the same issue also if you want to discard some layers because you have a bandwidth restriction or congestion. How do you know what is the bandwidth of each of the layer? Because at least I wrote in the document that I tried to figure out how we do it. It's basically we do it based on some knowledge from the past. We just try to figure out what's been happening in the streams and figure out what's each priority, what's the bandwidth of each priority. I think that's probably similar here. It's just some simple heuristics about it.
That doesn't sound like any text that needs to go into the document, if I heard that right.
Ronnie, do you agree that I mean, Mo thinks that means there does not need to be new text in the document.
Is there normative text that we could add, or even informative hints that we could add?
I think just some informative text that says that that you can figure out if you want to get to a specific bandwidth. So you want to know what's each layer, what bandwidth it is using. You can figure it out based on some past knowledge or some other means. You don't need to. I don't know if we need to specify that even. It's just. I think it's very trivial. Okay, from my perspective, it's nothing that is. You cannot figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think sort of the dual of that is that there's no promises about either the fraction of packets that have the discard bit or the fraction of packets that have any given layer information. It's just you have to figure it out by watching the stream. Yeah, everything's estimated. There's no there's no way that you can say up front what anything means, other than just they exist and have these relationships, but not their relative bandwidths.
Hi, Colin Perkins. I slightly feel we're having the last agenda item first. It's not clear to me that trying to estimate the fraction of the marking is necessarily going to work in practice, because it requires storing a lot of state information in the middle boxes in order to do that estimation. So, you know, if it's just a single drop bit, then yeah, we're probably okay. But if we're trying to signal different priority levels and different drop preferences, we probably
Well, I think it's
need to
also the
signal-
temporal layers that you get in frame marking
Yeah.
proper.
I mean, if you're going to be dropping things, you presumably need to know the statistics of how often things with particular markings occur to decide what to drop. And I mean, yes, I suppose in theory you could observe the stream and estimate that, but that relies on the stream being long-lived, and the problem's only occurring after the stream has been long enough lived for you to make a good estimate of the data, and you having enough state to be able to do that calculation on live traffic. And there may be cases where that works, but I suspect there are also a lot of cases where that's difficult to do.
Ronnie, I was just when I sent the email, I said that I think the same issue is equivalent to if you want to know when you have different in different layer, how much is used in each layer in order to figure out what if you want to drop to a specific bit rate. That's all. So it's the same problem. What I'm saying is the same problem.
I mean, Jonathan Lennox speaking as an individual who doesn't feel like standing up. I feel like this is, I mean, frame marking is sort of engineered to be a lightweight description of layers, not a heavyweight description of layers. And I think that that's sort of a fundamental assumption of this approach, that it just says, here are the layers and how they're behaving. We're not telling you anything about that. That's just that they exist. And if we want a heavyweight description of layers, then we need to have either some additional spec or an alternative spec to describe that. And I mean, apparently people think that this, as it exists, is sufficient for some of their use cases.
Colin Perkins, I think it depends what you're using it for.
Exactly.
I mean, if the idea is just that you want to filter out a particular layer in
Right,
its
well, yeah,
entirety, then this works great.
Hmm.
If you want to do some sort of fancy drop preference thing, then you need to know statistics
I mean,
of the
if you wanted to filter out a particular layer, you presumably need to know what the layer is, or have some notion of what the layer is to decide that that's a reasonable thing to do. So either you have to do that by just observing the stream or having some upfront knowledge about the stream, which we're not specifying at the moment.
I mean, I had sort of assumed that a lot of the use cases where you know what layers exist and you just want a marking so you can strip them out entirely to
Right.
gateway to a particular set of devices that don't support it.
Mhm.
And for that sort of use case, I would think this would work brilliantly. For things where you're trying to do prioritized drops and decide which things to drop and at which rates, then you need to know more about how many things are in each layer, and so you can get the amount of drop rates, sure.
So,
Which
what
is more a thing for Ronnie's draft.
Okay, so you think that for this draft, we don't, that's a comment more on Ronnie's draft, but for this draft, you think we're good? Or good enough for now?
I think this draft is good enough for now.
Okay.
I mean, the comment from Ronnie seems to be that you need that information for this draft, and I'm not sure you do, but I think you probably do for Ronnie's draft.
Okay. So that sounded to me like we didn't have any consensus to add any more text to your draft, Mo, and then there was some feeling that we didn't need to, so I'm going to go with that unless somebody screams. So I think back to what we were saying, just try to get the revised version out, and also, specifically call out on the list the changes you made so that people can review them and see whether they agree with them or think we need more changes or a new last call or anything like that. Okay, and is that it for the chair slides? I think so. Right. Yes, that's the last chair. Okay, yeah, so next is Colin with feedback. Congestion control feedback.
Hi. Okay. I'm Colin Perkins. Let's see half the slide.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out how one actually gets this properly full screen here. Does anybody know how to use Chrome? Really, I should get Justin to come up here. It's his fault.
Yeah, this one.
Ah.
Yeah, that's still cutting the.
Oh, I see. Oh, it even said there's even allowed to live with it. Okay.
That's cutting the bottom.
I
off
only
still,
know because I had this
but
problem
next slide
earlier
anyway.
today.
We are still cutting the bed. That might be that your aspect ratio doesn't match the aspect ratio of our Chromebook.
That could be, yes. Yes.
Yeah, they go out of that.
There. Perfect. Let's leave it like that.
Okay.
All right, next slide.
Except it doesn't do.
Now hit the other button and you'll be able to.
Okay, we'll just scroll. It's good enough. Right. So this is the congestion control feedback format, which we discussed at the last meeting. We've discussed in the RMCAT group a couple of times. Main thing that's happened is we got some comments on the RMCAT mailing list from Sergio, and there are also some comments from the previous IETF, which we only just got around to incorporating. And the 02 version, which was submitted yesterday because I'm disorganized, inferior addresses these comments. Next slide, please. Most of the changes are actually pretty straightforward. There's some clarifications that the timestamps, which are NTP format timestamps, use the same clock as those in the sender report packet, and it used to say sender report or receiver report, and then someone pointed out the receiver reports don't have such NTP format timestamps, so we can fix that.
Help with, maybe you don't need to say this, but there is an XR that has them too.
Yeah, so I suppose we could say that, but I'm not sure it matters. It's certainly the same clock as we use in the sender reports, which is the main thing. The format had beginning and ending sequence numbers. Sergio suggested that rather than reporting the ending sequence number, if we report the end sequence number +1, that would simplify his implementation. And in addition, it would allow us to report those two fields with the same value to signal that no packets were received in the interval. And you can infer that from the receiver reports, but it makes the code easier if it's all in the same block without having to rummage around in the other report block as well. So that's what's currently in the draft. There was also a comment, and Varun remembered this from someone said at one of the previous meetings, and I forget who it was, that maybe we should report beginning sequence number and length instead of that. And that would just allow us to report a length of 0 to indicate no packets received. And to me, that actually sounds cleaner. So I would perhaps suggest we change to beginning sequence number and length, but I'm not sure it matters that much. If anyone has opinions.
Informationally equivalent, so.
Yeah, it's just different ways of.
Yeah, and so I'd leave this to your judgment, and it sounds like your judgment is due.
My judgment is to do it, but if anyone who's thinking of implementing it has really strong opinions, then let me know. But I don't think it matters that much, to be honest. If not, next slide. Okay, there's some text in the draft that says if you don't accept a report where the sequence number space jumps by more than a quarter of the sequence number range as a way of a sort of crude check that the report is valid and sort of in window. And the latest version adds some text to say, well, okay, if you're ignoring things where the sequence number has jumped a significant amount, that's fine, but maybe there actually has been an outage. So if the outage has been long enough that it's reasonable that it could have jumped that much, then don't ignore it. And it's the sort of thing you have to implement anyway to make a robust implementation, and trying to phrase that in a way which suggests the right thing to do. If the phrasing is clear, that's great. If you read it and find that phrasing confusing, then please suggest either alternative phrases or tell me what you think is unclear about it. In addition, we put a note that you shouldn't have more than you shouldn't report on more than a quarter of the sequence number space in each packet, which is something Sergio thought would be worth clarifying. In practice, you couldn't anyway because the packets aren't big enough. And if we change to the length field, you can't either because the length is a 16-bit, so there won't be enough. Oh yeah, there will. Yeah. But the packets won't be big enough anyway, so it doesn't matter.
RTCP jumbograms?
Yeah. It might matter if you are tunneling with a TCP or something. So, but okay, next slide. Okay, the other thing we did was update the IANA considerations. We realized there was a registration missing. There was also a comment at the previous meeting that we needed SDP signaling, and since this is a congestion control feedback block, since this is an ACK, an RTCP ACK feedback thing, there is already an SDP mechanism defined to do that. We just needed to register the value to go in it. And we add that registration, and that lets you use the existing mechanism defined in RFC 4585 to signal that this is present, which is just the usual SDP attribute in the offer answer business. Next slide. And that's it. I think this is essentially done. I think probably the right thing to do is change it to beginning sequence number and length rather than beginning and ending sequence numbers. But with that change made, I think there are then no open issues. So I would encourage people to review the draft and give feedback and implement it, preferably.
Yeah, I do feel like this is something where it would be a lot more. I mean, I guess we've got one implementation now in a simulator, which is where we got Sergio's feedback, which is a good thing. But I'd obviously be a lot happier if we had this in actual running code, so that we could see, does this actually work with the, congestion algorithms people want on the actual internet? Is the bandwidth of the feedback itself reasonable in all the use cases people want? Is this basically a sensible? And so,
and there's a draft in RMCAT which does that bandwidth analysis for some simple cases, and I updated that draft to match what's in here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, but I think.
I mean, there's obviously only some cases, not all of the cases.
Yeah, I don't know. The analysis is one thing, and implementation is another. Sure. So I know we had some sort of discussion. I don't know if anybody would be interested in this. That thought of maybe trying to do, both for RMCAT and for this, doing maybe some hackathon work at the next IETF, if anybody's interested in that. Would anybody be interested in anything like that, or know anybody who would, or have any students you could recruit or to do that? I see somebody making big gestures, but I don't know. We do have two browser implementation people sitting here in the room. I don't know if either of them are even looked at this at all yet to see how it would be like to hook up to their congestion control algorithms. Neither Nils nor Justin is jumping to the mic. Naming and shaming works. Excellent.
So I can, Justin, you've already Google. I confess, some ignorance here. How does this compare to the, Stefan Holmer's, CC feedback message?
Similar but different.
Of course, it's similar but different.
No, I mean it's more. I think it doesn't require the forward path header extension. It's a little more verbose in the reverse path, but saves in on the media path, and requires a little bit more bookkeeping on the sender. Yeah. Basically, because rather than having an additional sequence number for every packet sent across all sources, you basically report back on this. For this source, these sequence numbers were received. For this source, these sequence numbers were received. Which, like I said, keeps the media packets smaller and also will generalize better to if you ever want to do actual multi-point congestion control. God help you. So.
Yes, so rather than putting an extra sequence number in, which I think that one did as a header extension, this uses the existing sequence numbers. So yeah, it makes the forward packets smaller and it fits with the way RTP works, perhaps a little more naturally. But it means you've got a little bit more bookkeeping, as Jonathan says.
But I mean, I would say suspect that if you're already using the Homer feedback, converting it to use this would be just slight changes in some data structures. But other than that, probably pretty similar.
I guess the real question is, like, if you already have one, what would one be looking for? What does the working group want to produce? Does it want to produce a specific recommendation of one of these particular message formats that everyone should use, or should we let sort of the market speak?
So, I mean, I think that the intention is that this would be the general feedback message. I mean, obviously, the existing drafts, the existing implementations probably aren't going to go away until, but I think the idea being this is something that was designed to work for all of the candidate feedback, all of the candidate congestion control algorithms that our MCAT is looking at. It had kind of inputs from all of those, I believe. And then the idea being that then even if people are using entirely disparate congestion control algorithms, they could use any of these feedback mechanisms. They could interoperate with this feedback message, specifically this being the one that the IETF recommends.
Yeah, I mean, what it reports is if you go back a couple of slides, I mean, it's reporting the lost packets and
the arrival times.
Yeah. Yeah. So for each packet, it reports whether it was received or not, what the ECN marks were, and when it was received. And it's not a particularly optimized format. There are ways of optimizing it. My analysis for the scenarios I looked at shows that optimizing it doesn't help you a lot, because the overhead of the the UDP packets and the sender reports and everything else as to go in the packet is so much that even if you halve the size of this, it doesn't save a significant amount. So it didn't seem worth optimizing it, but we can optimize it if people care.
But I guess the point is, like, if we actually implemented this, would we expect to see any difference in performance? Or
no. It will do the same thing as your current mechanism and all the different mechanisms everyone else is doing, right? It's just reporting the same information in.
I think it just gives you more hope of interoperating with more people, I think is the idea, and being able to use your mechanism.
Having two mechanisms is definitely not feedback.
No, the more mechanisms you have, the more likely it is that you'll find one in common with somebody else, right?
it sort of feels like we as a working group should put our weight behind one. If there's not anything,
the idea we're putting our weight behind this one. The other ones were all individual submission drafts, which never got traction.
I see.
I think it's important that these working groups put themselves more in the shoes of somebody trying to convince their boss they should allocate time to do this. So I've been in that position, and I've been asked some very uncomfortable questions, like the ones that Justin just asked. And I didn't have really convincing answers. And, having been through the situation where people say, oh, the way to get better interoperability is through a new standard, I've never actually had that achieve better interoperability. Fixing existing stuff and doing interop, that generally does actually produce better interoperability. So I can tell you that I would love if there was something in this document that said, here, we looked at all these different things and there's some convincing reason to do this.
Right. So
I just, like, I've been in that position and it's not been a good conversation.
Okay,
I haven't been able to come up with it.
So I think the technical reason to do this compared to the other mechanism is that this fits the way RTP does sources and sequence numbers better. Therefore, it's more likely to be future-proof for future extensions. If you believe what we have in WebRTC is the be-all and end-all and is not going to change, and we're never going to want to extend it, I think what you have will work. If we want to extend things, I think this fits the way RTP does sources and sequence numbering better, and therefore is more likely to fit with future extensions. And given that we have already been bit with a number of problems, building WebRTC with the definition of sessions and multiplexing and all of that mess with bundle, because people had built things in a way which wasn't very future-proof, maybe we should learn from that and try and move to something that's a little more future-proof.
This also does work. I mean, again, not so relevant for WebRTC itself, but could work for more RTP topologies. Like this would be not unreasonable for RTP multicast. I mean, nobody has a multicast congestion control algorithm yet, but I think there's nothing about this protocol that doesn't make sense for RTP multicast.
But in terms of information, it's reporting the same information in a different way. So yes, it will give you the same behavior. I personally believe it's more future-proof.
John. Apologize for not having checked with Holmer again. But last time I talked to him about this one, he said that converting to the new form would not be a bad thing. Would not be a hard thing at all. It has the information that he needs, which
Yeah,
is the critical part.
yeah, basically you just end up
of course, if there are more browsers that can generate this format, then can generate the format that Chrome is currently using, then Chrome will be happier.
Niels Omeyer, Mozilla. I guess since we don't implement the non-standardized version, we would rather implement the standardized version.
Depends how quickly Chrome implements the standardized one.
And the problem is, well, it doesn't matter because what's happened is there'll be people who'll do the old one and we'll have them in mobile apps that will ship for the next 5 years. And there's, yeah, I know. And you know what that conversation is like, which basically means you'll have to do the old one and you'll have to do the new one. And you'll have to negotiate between them and make sure that both of them operate sensibly.
Or you'll do what you do now and just not be congestion controlled with those devices.
No, everyone has
and that's
congestion
clearly
control
a terrible thing.
of some
but,
kind.
you know.
So anyway, it creates a ton of complexity to have to do this and be backward compatible. And anyway, it's kind of a nightmare, particularly for testing.
But Bernard, what you're saying then is basically I should implement the Google version and not care about the standard?
I would say you pretty much have to do the Google one because that's out there. And you'll probably spend the next year and a half fixing all the bugs and getting it to work. And then you'll be asking the same questions that we just asked. Why do I have to do this new thing and what do I get out of it? And your boss will ask you some very hard questions given how much time you just spent getting the old one to work.
Oh, but I think the other point, which I think relates to what Harold said about what he thought that Holmert said, is that the difference between implementing this and implementing the Holmert feedback is essentially what your whether your hash table keys are 16 bits or 48 bits, whether you're indexing by a new sequence number or SSRC and RTP sequence number. And other than that, and obviously the packetization, depacketization, but everything else is exactly the same. So at which point, most of the hard work, which is actually writing a congestion control algorithm, is the same.
Okay, Colin, let's go. I hear what Bernard's saying, but I sort of disagree that you'll need to implement both. I think you can easily, you've gotten 5 years of shipping without implementing any. So I don't really see this being real high on the priority list to go implement right away. So you might, I think if all the browser vendors agreed upon which one they were going to implement, preferably using a standards process to do that would be great. And that you probably don't need to implement all the old ones. You can probably get away with implementing the one that a bunch of people can decide to go forward with. I'm not arguing which one that one is, but that would be the really key thing to me is let's come down on one of those and not two. Justin, you ready? Practically speaking, people are going to basically set a flag in libWebRTC to basically enable like format 1 or format 2. So
You can negotiate both and see which one that is.
Yeah, I guess not.
Yeah, just don't.
No, why not? There must be a gazillion. Well, there's already at least 3 different, mutually exclusive congestion algorithms being negotiated by Chrome.
I'm not sure there yet, but
Oh, there's definitely 2. There's the Holmert feedback and there's the old.
Oh yeah, I guess absolute sequence number 2. Yeah, there probably are 3. Yeah, they're 2.5 on these. Anyway, I think the question for the Chrome team is like, okay, is this something that we think is a natural sort of evolution for our stuff anyway? And if we do make this, go in this direction, then I think that'll probably everyone else uses the WebRTC will follow, just because it'll not require 5 months of bug fixing. It'll be like, we'll do the 5 months of bug fixing, and then like other folks will have to mostly just turn it on. So we can kind of look into it and get back.
All right. So yeah, I think from a IETF point of view, let's do the thing you mentioned. That hopefully
Fixing the draft is clearly straightforward.
Yeah, fixing the draft is straightforward.
Whether people want to implement it is a
yeah, and I think if you could at least, I mean, if you at least like have your implementers look at it, like if you, like I said, if you think Stefan looked at it in the past, if you could look at it again and say, yes, this is easy, or oh my God, my hair is on fire, and let us know why his hair is on fire, that would be helpful.
Just to speed that along, though, is there like a place where like the sort of bake off of like what are the benefits are clearly enumerated?
I mean, the benefit over the other approach, if I'm remembering right, and it's been a while since I read the spec for the other.
I mean, I heard what you said before. I just wonder if they're written down somewhere that like, Stefan and I and Harold can sit down and go over.
I'm not sure they're written down. We discussed them in one of the previous meetings, so they're probably in the minutes. If I'm remembering right, it's that it reports on ECN, and I don't think the other one does, and that it fits the way we do sequence numbering and SSRCs in RTP better, which I think is just a lot cleaner and a lot more future-proof.
But it sounds like there's some trade-offs of what has to be put on the wire in terms of sequence number and everything like that. And I'm just wondering if there's any potential performance-related trade-offs here.
I mean, in terms of what goes on the wire, it makes the RTP packets smaller because you don't need the header extension.
The RTCP is maybe a little bigger,
the
but
RTCP is fractionally bigger, but
Right.
Given that the RTCP is happens less often than the RTP, I think that probably evens out.
Yeah, it's probably a wash. My main question is just, are there going to be any potential surprises of performance due to the fact that we don't have the global sequence number anymore?
No, because I think what you did before was just you use the global sequence number and you work out a fraction loss based on that.
Mm-hmm.
And what you would do this time is you would look up, okay, for this SSRC we see this many, this many packets sent and this many lost, and for this SSRC we see the same fraction. We add them up and you do the calculation.
I mean, if you wanted to implement it internally as you maintain that internally you have a global sequence number. You remember what SSRC and RTP sequence number reduced for each one. Then you get the feedback back. You look that up in your hash table, map it back, and run the exact same algorithm. That's a perfectly reasonable implementation.
Okay, I actually think it's much simpler than that. You look it up. For SSRC1, you've lost this fraction out. You've lost 6 out of 1,000 packets. For SSRC2, you've lost 1 out of 1,000 packets. That gives you 7 out of 2,000, and that gives you your lost fraction.
All right. Well,
rather than just directly reporting you've lost 7 out of 2,000.
Which does give you then more fine-grained information more easily, in case that's useful to you.
all right. We'll think about Stefan and see if we can make some statement regarding our plans.
Okay.
All right.
Am I done? I think so. Do you think so?
I think so. All right, thank you.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right, there we are. Now where's full screen? Because this is PowerPoint. All right, there we are. Okay. Let's probably want that a little higher.
Yeah. So, I'm Magnus Westlund. I'm speaking for the other authors about what we've done lately with the guidelines for using the multiplexing features of RTP. And this is to support the multiple media streams. So this is the guidance documents. We're up to version 06. So next slide.
Oops, that's 2 minutes.
Well, we can skip the outline. So this is a short presentation. Well, there've been lots of editorial changes in the latest version, and you will definitely see that if you do look at the diff. But you have we worked on improving the use of the RTP taxonomy, RFC 7656. We've done some significant changes around the descriptions of the RTP sessions, the synchronization source, and in the RTP payload type description. There's some changes around the binding the related sources. And we looked a bit more into clarifying some of the RTP translator into working. We're also clear in the multicast related stuff about talking both about ASM and SSM differences. Also what we call design choices, these broader categories of choices between how you put in multiple media streams in one session, in having them in the same session, in multiple sessions, etc. And so that's focused a bit, being focused down on the most relevant differences, and some of the really not meaningful ones has been removed. So, and we also improved the security considerations discussion. So, next. So, this document's open issue is that we had, as in the audit team, we had some discussion around what's currently is written around RTP sinks and RTP sources. We had a discussion on yesterday around this, and our proposal is basically to work more around the use of RTP participants. So a sink would be basically, could be described as an RTP participant in an RTP session that receives RTP data packets. Something along that line. We're going to wordsmith this further as we do the updates. Another issue we had was in the issue list in the draft was around MSID, and actually our suggestions is actually to remove a discussion of MSID because it's no longer really, it's a very RTC web specific binding of media tracks to media streams, and it's really not obvious that it's applicable in general. So our suggestion here is to remove it. And also for improving these design choices and going from one, we're actually going to revert the order of the subsections and try to find better labels of what we call them. But that's basically what we see as the main things. We can take the next slide. The rest is primarily after fixing these kind of open issues, and there's some additional, I think, editorial improvements we can do to document, but really the goal should be that by the next version, in time for the next, before the next meeting, should have be ready actually for working with BLASCall. It's time to finish this document. And I think we're getting there. So. Any comments, questions, etc.? Okay, good. I will continue then on.
So when do you think you'll have the next version?
Before Bangkok.
All right, so.
I think we need to get started a bit earlier, so we actually, because it's going to take a few, I think, rounds between our editors as authors to agree on the editorial changes.
Yeah, and I know none of you are working in August. So.
No, definitely not. So it's going to be, we have September and October, I think, for doing this.
Right. Finally, Ronnie.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Evan. This is the frame marking, priority marking draft that it's now in version, the individual version is version 02. Can you go to the next slide? Oops. So, okay. So it adds priority value for the non-scalable stream droppable frame. It's applicable to a single RTP stream and not for comparing between multiple streams. So it allows a middle box to discard part or all of the discardable frame as marked by the encoder. It provides more option for changing the bitrate on congestion. and it's allowed differentiation between reference and non-reference B-frame to provide a different priorities to allow to drop first non-reference B-frame, and also to drop a P-frame that are closer to the end of the group of to the GOP is better than dropping one at the beginning and can be marked as droppable with lowest priority. The things that we believe is, I looked at if we can signal what is, there was a question about if we can figure out how we can figure out how much are there from each priority level in terms of the ratio between them. So I looked at trying to provide some signaling, and the only idea I had about it was to add some extension attribute, because I couldn't have it there, and then it would be to offer a mutual exclusive, which is very complicated. I didn't know if it makes sense to do that in the first place, and we discussed it internally because we are using that, and the way currently we are doing that is we are doing estimation based on history about how many RTP packets are in each priority. We have to take into account this is mostly done in streaming application where the structure is very fixed, like you know how many the I-frame, B-frame, and P-frame, the structure is repeatedly all the time. So at least you know the general structure is well known in those type of applications. Next slide. So the solution is just to add 2 bits from the 4 must be 0 bits when 0 because if we have the non-scalable case, there are bits that must be 0, so we are suggesting to use 2 of them to provide priority, where 0, 0 is the highest priority, which will keep it as it is today, and the 1, 1 would be the lowest priority. So if you don't support it, then the 0, 0. This works even if priority is present but not supported by the middle box, and it doesn't break any interoperability with the current frame marking proposal. The thing that we discussed in the past is that at least we won't do anything with that until we finish the frame marking, and then we can decide to do it as a second document afterwards. So we're still waiting for so I don't think we need to adopt it now, but we can look at it after the frame marking it will go to publication.
But just to get a sense, I mean, I know that this is primarily for streaming, which we probably don't really have so much constituency for, but if is anybody interested in this work? I mean, and do you have people outside Huawei interested in this?
We are doing it internally. I don't know if it's done outside. We didn't check it, but I know that internally we are doing it with testing, and we are using that internally. And in most cases, it's also on the Wi-Fi connection router, because that's where we have some problem when you go inside. There's congestion inside the home, so that's how it's being used.
All right, so I guess, like I said, we're going to defer this until frame marking is finally done, which is going to happen real soon, right?
Mo is not here.
No, he's here now.
Okay.
I don't know. He was
so he's not there.
Yeah.
I didn't see him coming.
Yeah, he's snuck in the back. I don't know where he was before, but now he's stuck in the
He
room.
was there. He was traveling fast from home.
Yeah, that's it's very efficient.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so I guess we'll.
Okay. So we are now. We finished with our.
I think we're now finished. With
So can I say something about the payload stuff?
Yeah, sure, please.
So as long as I'm standing here, in payload, and Mo is here, we are trying to finish the one that's the RTC web is on the list of the RTC web. It's just the flexible FAQ. I hope Mo is supposed to provide based on comments that made by Magnus. And I hope that Steve will also try to give it a last look, because he gave a lot of comments on the first working group last call. So we'll try to finish it as soon as possible. All right, Mo? I mean, that's
Mo, I just submitted a revision that has all the changes for Magnus and quite a few more changes. So I think it would really be good for anyone that reviewed the earlier versions of the document to look at it again. A lot of changes in sections 4 and 6 where people were complaining about confusion.
Mhm.
So the layouts of the formats are now more clearly spelled out, and the recovery procedures are more clearly spelled
So,
out.
so maybe I should do another working group plus call. Okay, so I'll do another working group plus call, a short one. But I hope people now, I mean, as long as the people are here, I think that please do review it once this comes on the in the tools and on the website and provide feedback, because we want to finish with it. We don't want to be last here. We have our area director. Yeah.
This is Ben. I'm just making sure everyone has their payload hats on so I can glare at everyone. This last time around, the working group last call, the feedback came in slowly and such, and we really need to turn this around. So I please, and I appreciate that Mo is turning things around quickly. Please, everyone else also turn around quickly.
Okay. So,
And, if there's a way that once the changes are in there, this working group last call can be scoped to the changes as opposed to everything, that might be a good thing, but
at least what I did, I tried to verify that it addresses the comments that I saw on the list in the version personally to verify. And I hope now that I'll just wait for Steve. You'll do that. So I'll wait for Steve to look at it. And Magnus will have to look and see that his comment is addressed. And I think we'll cover that.
so you're suggesting not a full working group last call?
We want, because there are changes. I mean, there are changes in the structure, so they're technical, not basically editorial, as far as I understand from Mo. So we need to have a working group class call if it's technical changes,
Okay.
right? More, it's more like technical, right? The changes.
I think it's the chair's call on how material the changes are.
Yeah, but I
But
mean,
you can make the call on whether you think it needs it.
Okay, no problem.
They were mostly clarification, so the wording confused people and was unclear. So we clarified a lot of the formats. So restructuring of the presentation of the formats, not the actual formats. There was one technical change that Magnus suggested that the authors agreed with, which was changing the retransmission format
Yeah.
to just change the meaning of one of the bits. So it was previously defined that the F bit was 1. Now it's redefined to be 0.
Yeah.
Just makes it simpler for copying the RTP packet as is to retransmit it.
Okay, so
That's the one technical change.
okay, so just wait for please do the reviews and then we'll say the publication. There's other payload. There's a payload there which is in working group last called, but it's getting reviewed by outsiders from here who are interested in this codex. So we got reviews on that, and I did a review to verify that it's correct according to the structure of the document, and they should need to bring another version, and that's the Tetra one, the Tetra audio codec. Okay.
And Justin and I owe you VP9.
Hmm?
And Justin and I owe you finishing VP9, and we will try to nag each other to do that.
I'm not the ones that are not still in working with Blast Code. That's not.
Well,
It's your problem.
I figure we've got multiple interoperable implementations. We should actually publish the draft.
Okay, so you just let us know. Let the chairs know. I mean that you're ready, and we'll try. Ali is also. I don't remember who else, but that's
No,
all.
All right. Anything else AVT related that anybody wants to talk about? If not, you can go and, I don't know, look at the AMRW poster presentations or something. Thank you all for coming, and see you as individuals the rest of the week and as a working group in Bangkok.
Yeah, but I think now, big included, so it's yeah.
Hello.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you. Oh, yes. Hey.
Yeah.
How are you? Yes.
Yeah, I was not aware of all these things.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Well, that's, yeah, no, yeah, no, it's obviously it's all, you know, it's hard to come in, yeah, but yes. Yes.